Okay, so let's talk about the cloud. For what, the last 15 years, the playbook for pretty much any modern business has been simple.
Right.
You generate data, customer logs, video files, these huge AI training sets, and you shove it all into the cloud, you lock it away in a digital warehouse like AWS S3, and you feel safe.
You check the box. Job done.
Job done until you actually try to use that data.
That's it. That's when you realize the warehouse has a very, very expensive toll booth at the exit.
Right. It's the Hotel California problem of the modern internet. You can check out anytime you like, but you can never leave without writing a massive check.
Exactly.
And that is the starting point for today's deep dive. We're looking at a really fascinating internal strategic assessment, dated just yesterday, January 22, 2026.
Yeah, this thing is fresh. It's a memo addressed to a board of directors, and it's essentially asking for permission to do something that, until recently, would have been considered professionally reckless.
And what's that?
Firing Amazon Web Services for their storage needs and moving to a decentralized protocol called Walrus.
The title of the memo is Comparative Analysis of Decentralized Storage, Walrus versus AWS S3. And the stakes here, this is real money. The scenario they're modeling is an enterprise with 20 terabytes of data.
Yeah, and they are just bleeding cash on storage fees. They're looking for an escape hatch.
But it's more than just saving a few bucks on the monthly bill, right?
Absolutely. This report argues that the entire model of how we pay for infrastructure is basically broken. They're exploring whether DePIN, that's decentralized physical infrastructure networks, is finally ready for the enterprise.
And our mission today is to figure out if they're right. Is this technology actually ready for the big leagues, or is it still, just a science experiment for crypto enthusiasts?
Yeah, good question.
Because reading through this report, some of the financial claims they make, my jaw dropped. We're talking about a model they call net zero storage, where your data effectively pays its own rent.
It sounds impossible, I know. But the math in the report is, well, it's pretty compelling.
We are definitely going to dig into that math because I have some serious skepticism there. But before we get to the solution, we have to understand the problem. Why would a sane CTO want to leave the safety of AWS?
Right.
Amazon is the gold standard. Nobody gets fired for buying IBM, and nobody gets fired for using AWS.
That's true, but that safety comes at a premium. The memo highlights that for this 20 terabyte data set, the 3-year total cost of ownership on AWS S3 is estimated at over $16,560.
Okay, so 16 grand. For a big company, that's not exactly bankruptcy money. Why is this such a crisis?
Because that number is really misleading. That $16,000 is mostly just the cost of letting the data sit there. The real killer, the silent budget destroyer, as the report calls it,
Is what?
it's the egress fees.
Egress fees. So that's the cost to download your own files, right?
Correct. If you want to take that data and feed it into an AI model in a different cloud or download it to a local server for analysis, AWS charges you per gigabyte. It effectively holds your data hostage. You can't move it because the ransom is too high, so you end up locked into their whole ecosystem for compute, for analytics, for everything.
So you're paying rent to store it, and you're paying a toll just to use it. I can see why that's frustrating.
And that's where this shift to DePIN comes in. The report contrasts AWS, which builds these massive, centralized, fortress-like data centers, with Walrus.
Right.
Walrus doesn't build data centers. It coordinates a global network of independent nodes.
Okay, let's pause on independent nodes, because when I hear that, I picture like a teenager in a basement with a gaming PC.
Yeah, fair.
If I'm a board member, I'm not putting my corporate records on a teenager's hard drive. Who are these nodes?
That's a valid concern, but the reality is quite different. The report clarifies that while anyone can join, the network is largely incentivized for professional operators.
Okay.
So we're talking about independent data centers, regional ISPs, enterprise-grade facilities that just have excess storage capacity. They treat storage as a commodity. They compete to offer the lowest price.
So it's almost like an Airbnb for hard drives?
In a sense, yeah, you're utilizing excess capacity in professional facilities.
Okay.
And because they aren't bogged down by the huge corporate overhead of an Amazon or a Google, the prices are driven way, way down, closer to the actual cost of the hardware.
All right. That explains the economics of the nodes. But let's look at the tech.
Yeah.
Is Walrus just like a clone of Dropbox that runs on a blockchain?
No, and that's a common misconception. The architecture is way more sophisticated. The memo describes it as a hybrid architecture. You have to think of it as two separate systems working together, the brain and the body.
Okay, let's unpack that. Start with the brain.
The brain is the control plane. In Walrus's case, this lives on the SUI blockchain. And this is what handles all the metadata, who owns the file, billing, permissions, proofs that it exists.
Why specifically the SUI blockchain? I mean, there are hundreds of blockchains out there.
Speed and throughput. The report notes that for an enterprise storage system, you can't wait 10 minutes for a transaction to clear. SUI allows for parallel processing, so it can handle the massive volume of metadata transactions a global storage network generates.
Hmm.
But the key here, the real innovation, is that this metadata layer makes the storage programmable.
Programmable how? What does that mean?
It means you can attach smart contracts to the data. Imagine code that just executes automatically. You could write a contract that says, if a user sends a micropayment of 5 cents, instantly grant them a temporary decryption key for this video file.
Whoa.
Or, after 365 days, automatically change the ownership of these logs to the archive wallet.
So you're automating all the admin work.
You're removing the human middleman entirely.
Mm-hmm.
But, and this is the crucial part, the brain only holds the metadata, the actual heavy files, the videos, the data sets that never touch the blockchain.
Right, because storing a 4K video on-chain would cost, what, millions of dollars?
Exactly. Which brings us to the body, the data plane. These are those independent nodes storing the raw bytes, the blobs.
Okay.
And there's a vital security note here. Those nodes have absolutely no idea what they're storing.
They don't, even though it's sitting on their hard drives.
Nope. The data is encrypted and sharded before it ever leaves your possession. So to a node operator, your customer database just looks like a stream of random noise. They get paid to store the noise, not to read it.
That's a really different trust model. You're trusting the math of the encryption rather than trusting that, some AWS employee won't snoop.
That's the core philosophy. Trust code, not corporations.
Speaking of trusting math, I want to get into the technical secret sauce the report mentions. They talk about something called red stuff.
Yes, red stuff.
Which sounds like a terrifying substance from a sci-fi movie.
Right.
But the report claims this is the reason Walrus is so cheap. Now, usually when someone tells me their product is 90% cheaper, I assume it's 90% worse.
Yeah.
But the report says it's just better math.
It is. The technical term is 2D erasure coding. And to understand why it's such a breakthrough, we have to look at how the old school cloud does it.
Okay, how does AWS keep my data safe?
They typically use something called replication. And it's exactly what it sounds like. If you want 99.99% durability, they take your file and they make 3 to 5 full photocopies of it. They store one copy in server A, another in server B, another in server C.
So if I have 1 terabyte of data, I'm actually paying for 5 terabytes of hard drive space.
Effectively, yes. You are multiplying your hardware footprint and your cost by 300 to 500%. It works, but it is incredibly wasteful.
And Walrus doesn't do that.
No. Walrus uses this red stuff, or 2D erasure coding. I want you to imagine taking your file and running it through this specialized shredder that turns it into a mathematical grid.
A grid, okay, like a Sudoku puzzle.
Exactly, like a Sudoku puzzle or a matrix. Now, Walrus takes that grid and calculates extra information for every row and every column. These are called parity shards.
Parity shards.
Yeah, it's like adding a checksum at the end of every row.
Yeah.
Then it just scatters the pieces of that grid across dozens of different nodes.
Wait, hold on. So instead of photocopying the document 3 times, you're shredding it and keeping a mathematical formula to glue it back together.
That's a great way to put it. And here is where the magic happens. Because of that 2D grid structure, you can lose a massive amount of the pieces and still reconstruct the original file perfectly.
How massive? If I lose half the pieces, is my data gone?
No. The report says you can recover the full file even if 1/3 to 2/3 of the nodes go offline simultaneously.
That is wild. So half the network could crash or half the hard drives could just fail and I still get my file back.
Yes, and the kicker is, to achieve that level of invincibility, Walrus only adds about 4x to 5x overhead. But the red stuff optimization means the repair cost, the bandwidth needed to fix a broken file, is tiny compared to traditional systems.
Wow.
You aren't recopying the whole file, you're just solving for the missing variable in the equation.
So it's higher durability with less hardware?
Which directly translates to lower costs.
All right, let's talk about those costs. Because the numbers in this memo are staggering, and this is where my skepticism radar just starts pinging. We said AWS was over 16 grand for 3 years. What is Walrus coming in at?
For the same 20 terabytes, the estimate is somewhere between $200 and $500 per year.
Stop. $500. versus $5,500 a year on AWS.
It's a 90 to 95% reduction in raw storage costs. And remember, because of the architecture, the egress fees are basically negligible.
Okay, I can wrap my head around cheaper. Walmart is cheaper than Whole Foods, I get it. But then the report goes into this net zero thesis, and this is where I need you to walk me through it very, very slowly, because it sounds like magic internet money.
It is definitely a paradigm shift.
The report says you can store data for free. Actually, it implies you could even make money storing your own data. That sounds like a Ponzi scheme.
Yeah.
Walk me through the mechanics. How is that sustainable?
It's not magic, it's finance. But it requires you to stop thinking of storage as a utility bill and start thinking of it as an asset class.
Okay, I'm listening.
So in the AWS model, storage is an operating expense, right? OpEx.
Yeah.
You pay the bill, the money is gone. Sunk cost.
Right.
Walrus introduces a staking model.
Staking, that's a crypto term. Translate that for a CFO.
Think of it like a certificate of deposit or a bond. You take a lump sum of capital and you lock it up to earn interest. In this case, instead of paying the $500 annual fee, the company buys about $5,000 worth of the Walrus token, the WAL token.
Oh, what?
They stake those tokens to a storage node.
So I'm buying a bond, essentially.
Yes, and that stake earns rewards interest, which is estimated at 8 to 12% APY.
And that interest pays the storage bill.
That interest covers the storage cost. So if you have $5,000 stake earning 10%, you get $500 a year in rewards. Use that $500 to pay for your 20 terabytes of space.
So the ongoing cash flow cost is zero.
Correct. And here's the difference. You still own the $5,000 principal. You've turned a sunk cost into a capital asset on your balance sheet.
Okay, I see the mechanics, but where is that yield coming from? Money doesn't just grow on trees. Is the network just printing money to pay me? Because that usually leads to inflation and a crash.
That is the right question to ask. The yield comes from a mix of network fees and significantly a subsidy pool set up by the Walrus Foundation. And the report is very honest about this. It flags something called the subsidy cliff.
Ah, the catch. I knew there was a catch.
Currently, the prices are artificially low and the rewards are high to bootstrap the network. The report estimates that post-2029, that subsidy pool will dry up.
So the free ride ends.
It changes. Once the subsidy ends, prices will rise to the true cost of hardware, which they estimated around $150 per terabyte.
Okay.
But, and this is key, even at that true cost, it is still 60 to 70% cheaper than AWS is today.
So the net zero dream might be temporary, but the massive savings reality is structural.
That's the conclusion. It's a window of opportunity to lock in these incredible economics, but even the worst-case future scenario is better than the current status quo.
Okay, that seems like a fair assessment. So if the tech is solid and the savings are massive, why aren't they moving everything? The recommendation in the memo is for a hybrid strategy. Why not just dump AWS entirely and buy a yacht with the savings?
Speed. Physics is still physics.
Yeah.
AWS S3 is incredibly fast. We're talking sub-millisecond latency.
Right.
If you're running a high-frequency trading bot or a user session where a millisecond of lag makes a customer rage quit, Walrus isn't there yet.
Right. Gathering shards from nodes all over the world takes time.
It does. So the report wisely recommends keeping that Tier 1 hot data financial ledgers, real-time app states on AWS. You pay the premium for the speed. But for Tier 2 and Tier 3 data,
What's that?
archival logs, backups, media assets, move all of that to Walrus.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, looking at the competitive landscape, the report briefly mentions other players like Arweave and Filecoin. I know a bit about Arweave. They do permanent storage. Why did the report pick Walrus over the forever option?
This is a crucial strategic point, especially for a corporation. Forever sounds great until you talk to your legal team.
Let me guess. GDPR.
GDPR, the right to be forgotten corporate retention policies.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have to delete data if a user demands you delete their account, or if you have a legal settlement requiring you to purge records. Arweave is a liability. Once it's on the permaweb, it's there. You can't scrub it.
That's a nightmare for compliance.
Exactly. Walrus uses a rent model. You subscribe to storage space for a set time and epoch. If you stop paying or choose to delete, the data vanishes. It aligns much better with how businesses actually operate and comply with the law.
And Filecoin.
Filecoin is a powerful network, but the user experience is pretty complex. It's described as a deal-making market, where you have to negotiate terms with individual providers. Walrus abstracts all that complexity away. It feels more like a standard SaaS product. You pay, you store, you're done.
So Walrus is kind of the Goldilocks solution, cheaper than AWS, but more flexible and compliant than the other crypto options. Let's talk about risks, though. This memo is dated 2026. Walrus is, what, a year or two old?
Launched around 2024, 2025. It's a toddler compared to
And
AWS.
toddlers fall down. AWS has survived floods, fires, and hackers for 20 years. Walrus hasn't.
That is the maturity risk.
Yeah.
Absolutely. There could be bugs in the protocol that just haven't been discovered yet. That is why the memo suggests the mirror strategy.
Is.
Don't cut the cord immediately. For the first 12 months, they suggest keeping a backup copy on AWS Glacier Deep Archive.
That's the super cheap, like, tape storage that AWS offers.
Yes, it costs pennies, but it's slow. It's an
Right.
insurance policy. If Walrus has some kind of catastrophic failure, you can still restore from Glacier. It's a smart, low-risk way to transition.
One other risk I saw was token volatility. If I need to buy these Walter tokens to pay for storage, and the price of the token shoots up 200% overnight because of some crypto bull run, didn't my storage cost just triple?
That's a huge concern for any CFO. You can't have your infrastructure costs fluctuating like a meme stock.
Right.
The memo points out that Walrus allows you to pre-buy storage resources.
Like locking in a mortgage rate.
Exactly. You could buy a 3-year reservation today. You lock in the price in USD terms, so if the token goes to the moon or crashes to zero, it doesn't matter. You have your storage space booked and paid for.
Smart. It seems like they've really thought through the objections a board of directors would have.
I have. And the fact that the project was funded by heavy hitters like A16s and Franklin Templeton gives it a level of institutional credibility that reduces the rug pull risk.
Okay, so we've covered the costs, the tech, the risks. Before we get to the final verdict, there's one section of the report that felt a bit futuristic. It discusses AI agents.
This is the future-proofing section. And honestly, it's probably the most visionary part of the whole document.
But I want to connect the dots here. We spent a lot of time talking about programmable storage on the Sui blockchain earlier. How does that connect to AI? Why does a chatbot care where its memory is stored?
Well, it's not just about chatbots. It's about autonomous agents. We are moving toward a world where AI agents will perform tasks independently, buying services, negotiating data access, executing trades.
Right.
If an AI agent lives on AWS, it relies on your credit card and your identity. It's tethered to you.
Okay.
But on Walrus, because the storage is controlled by a blockchain wallet, an AI agent can effectively own itself. It can hold its own funds. It can pay for its own storage.
So it can buy and sell data without a human signing off?
Precisely.
Yeah.
Imagine an AI that collects weather data. It stores that data on Walrus. Other agents pay it micropayments to access that data. The AI uses those payments to pay for its own storage costs. It becomes a self-sustaining economic loop.
That is slightly terrifying, but also very cool. It's like a bank account and a hard drive combined for robots.
The report mentions partnerships with Thales Network and Humanity Protocol. They're positioning Walrus as the memory layer for this new economy. If this enterprise plans to deploy autonomous AI tools in the future, having their data on Walrus gives them a native advantage.
Okay, so the upside is huge cost savings, future-proofing for AI. The downside is maturity risk, which can be mitigated with backups. What's the verdict? Does the memo say go?
It's a cautious go. They aren't betting the farm on day one. The final recommendation is for a pilot program.
Testing the water.
They approved a $5,000 allocation. They're going to buy some tokens, set up a node, and migrate 5 terabytes of non-critical data marketing assets, old video archives.
A low-risk experiment.
Exactly. Test the upload speeds, verify the net zero staking rewards, and see if the user experience holds up. If it works, then they start the big migration of the 20 terabyte cold storage.
It feels like a very sensible, measured approach to a very disruptive technology.
It is. It bridges the gap between the reliability we expect from Web 2 and the economic breakthroughs of Web 3.
So, bringing it all back to our listener, we started with this idea of being a data hostage.
And we're ending with a roadmap to sovereignty.
It's impressive. The idea that your data could essentially pay its own rent is something that could rewrite the balance sheet of every major tech company.
It really could. And if we look at the bigger picture, it raises a provocative question for everyone listening. We spent the last 15 years in the cloud era acting as tenants in Amazon's house. We accepted that we have to pay rent to exist online.
And you think that lease is up?
I think with protocols like Walrus, we are moving to an era where we own the infrastructure. When storage becomes a capital asset, something you invest in rather than a bill you pay, what happens to the business model of the cloud? If the cloud isn't the landlord anymore, but a utility we all own a piece of, I mean, that changes the entire internet economy.
That is a massive thought to chew on. From tenants to owners, I love it. We'll be tracking this pilot program closely to see if the savings hold up. That's all for today's deep dive into the Walrus Protocol. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you on the next one.